Good afternoon. There seems to be a high attrition post the break, And maybe because, how many of you are from academics here? How many from industry? So Himanshu, you have to be very careful.
Seriously. There's some people who haven't raised their hands. Where are you from? The hotel staff. Okay. That would be industry, though.
Well, it's a privilege to be with you, Himanshu, on this conversation. My view, and we'll share like we discussed outside, that the industry always has this perception, to be very polite, that we don't get the right type of talent trained from academia. Academia just dishes out what is in the curriculum, assess them on the grades, and put them out in the market. And whether they are employable or what is the employability score is always a question. As a result, in the industry, people end up retraining the talent we have hired. And that's cost, both in terms of time, effort, and resources. We wonder as to whether academia world is aware of this dilemma or not. What is your view?
All right. So that's quite a googly to be thrown to an academic. It's almost like Akhil telling us that we are not doing enough. I take it. I take it on my chin. And you see, let's say some institutions of national importance of higher education are probably doing what is required to be done, but a lot of institutions are not. Now, there are multiple reasons, though, behind it. The first reason, I think, is that academia has always lagged behind the industry for the simple reason that if I look at academia 10 years, 15 years back, we used to revise our programs once in 5 years, and perhaps the courses once in 3 years. Now, clearly, that cannot be done in a rapidly changing world, particularly with technology becoming a huge enabler, and therefore we need to do something which is faster. So for example, at IIM Indore, now we do it in 3 years, and we look at the courses every year. Okay. So every year there's a courses committee which sits and says, hey, this is something that we need to add, this is something that we need to subtract, this is what we need to modify. At the same time, I'm going to lob the ball back at the industry and say that the industry also does not connect with academia to the extent that it should. So for example, a lot of people tell me that you use case method, and there are not many Indian cases when it comes to management teaching. The problem is we don't get data from the Indian industry. Whenever we ask for data, the industry people are extremely reluctant, the organizations are extremely reluctant, and more importantly, and I think this is somewhere a part of our national culture, we don't like to acknowledge failures. No, so if I ask an organization that, hey, you messed up in that particular decision, why don't you share it with us? Because that's going to be an excellent material for the classroom, for discussion. But the industry doesn't want to do that. The organization doesn't want to do that. The organization leadership does not want to do that. And I think partly we have our culture to blame. We don't celebrate failures. We look down upon failure. And that is the reason why a lot of people do not get into entrepreneurship, simply because they're afraid. What if I fail? What is my family going to say? What is the society going to say? What is the country going to think of me? So I think both of us need to sit together, which means the industry and the academia. We need to thrash this out as to how we can exchange information and then see as to how we can help each other. But hang on. So I'm going to now throw something at you. Why is there a reluctance to share data in the industry? I mean, you've been on the other side for the longest time and you sit on so many boards.
Well, fair pushback. I'm surprised that industry is reluctant to share data. It must be true. If you say so, it must be true. But that's not fair. Because at one end, industry is accused by academia that we only go to campuses at the harvest time. When we go to recruit, and on the way back after recruiting, we all keep can't use the word politely, but we all keep talking about, oh, look at the poor quality of students, look at the coverage is so poor. So I admit to some extent that the industry is also to be blamed. I'm not saying that academia has to be blamed. But the fact is that when we offer sabbatical, I personally remember in one of my career in a big multinational IT company, we offered 4 months exposure to professor to come and spend time in industry. It's not their fault. I mean, the system didn't allow. 4 months, how will she go away? who will take a place in classes. Now, if there is a shortage of data or reluctance of industry from data, then what I said in the beginning is unfair comment. I admit that. But I think instead of just doing like this, we have to come to a common platform and we can generate something of value.
That was interesting music.
Not bad.
Yeah, sorry.
Vinay, is that you're doing music lagana? You are laughing away. So coming back, sir, if the industry is not sharing data, have you ever thought, I mean, I wish there was some research done because we are starved of research in industry. What we do, we go to each other, we go to best benchmark, we go to experience what I have done 15 years ago, we succeeded, and sometimes we relabel the thing that worked that time but may not work this time. There's no empirical data, there's no research to go to. And I'll give you a live example, Himanshu. We talked about at length about this great resignation. Not one institute has looked at attrition, the depth of it, and come to us and say, you guys are goofing up. Do like this, it might improve. And we need that. So, you know, it's such a big chasm that academia and industry has created, and we are extra polite to each other. We are very polite to each other, and as a result, the outcome is disastrous.
You're right. So I think there are some steps which have been taken. So for example, at IIM Indore, we have mandated that every area has a board of studies which should necessarily have a person from the industry. Of course, we give preference to our own alumni, but other than the alumni, also the industry people are kind of most welcome. And now we are going out and doing some work with the industry. So for example, we used to do a lot of consultancy any which way, but most of the consultancy was for the government. But recently, for example, Unilever came to us and they wanted us to do something. Ironically, not Unilever in India, but Unilever in Arabia. Be that as it may, at least that's industry of some sorts. We have also started the concept of professors of practice. So we actually invite people from the academia to come and take not just a guest session or some such thing, but take an entire course or spend some time with us. And the third thing that we have started is, we had earlier a program called Scholar in Residence, where we would invite a faculty from some other institution abroad to come and spend some time with us. Now, what we have done at IIM Indore is, we have extended it to entrepreneur in residence, artist in residence, an industrialist in residence, a CEO in residence. So they can come stay with us from anywhere between 2 weeks to 2 months, spend time and then do something.
And they are from industry?
They're from the industry. And the other thing, for example, we were doing some work with AstraZeneca, which wanted us to look at the socioeconomic cost of lung cancer. Now, the moment we started talking about that, suddenly I had a lot of hospitals come to me and say, Professor, why don't you work with us? We want to look at the socioeconomic cost of alcohol-led liver diseases, which is a big problem so far as India is concerned. There was another hospital which came to us about a month back and said, look, we are sitting on a massive amount of data because they are into ophthalm, so eyes, etc. And they said, we have massive amounts of data about what kind of people get cataract at what kind of age, what kind of people have these eye issues. So if you can do some analysis and do something predictive about it, then we would be happy. So, those barriers are breaking, but still those examples are few and far between. We would love for the industry to come and talk to us about their problems. And I think one of the things that happens, Akhil, is also who will go first. We're so reluctant to go and talk to somebody because we are sitting on those high pedestals of being whatever, the heads of institutions and the heads of organizations, so on and so forth. I'll give you an example. We go and talk to the rest of the world about international partnerships. When I came to Indore, I was horrified to know that despite Indore being the only city at that point of time which had both an IIM and an IIT, we were not doing anything together. And I said, hey, we need to kind of do something about it. And when I tried to find out why were we not doing anything together, it was simply because we couldn't decide who should go to whom first.
Oh.
And therefore, I asked my driver to take me to IIT Indore. I had a conversation, and lo and behold, now IIM and IIT together have a joint Masters of Science in Data Science and Management. So I think that also matters as to who takes the initiative.
But at the end of the day, the industry is very keen on collaboration because you are the supplier of talent to run the industry. So it would be like sitting on a branch and chopping the branch out on which you sit. But there's no opportunity. And I'll give you a live example, Himanshu. Many of us are on the advisory board of institutions. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but those advisory boards meetings are so surface-driven. Nobody goes and tells us, okay, here's a curriculum, and what needs revision. Now, I would not be saying that in academic would not do that. I mean, I wouldn't say that, but if they do it in very subtle manner. We want to participate in shaping the curriculum, because at the end of the day, what ingredients you put in the dish, and if the final dish is not coming out as per our liking, we have failed. I don't see that opportunity, frankly. I don't see that. When I was in Motorola, I looked after Asia Pacific, and in Korea and Japan, we had a forum, government, academy, and industry, which would meet every 18 months. And they would go through the entire curriculum and call people who are knowledgeable in scientists or who are technical experts in futurologists and say, what are the trends happening in future or likely to happen now and in future? And can we tweak the curriculum that way? So, what we are talking is actually common sense to both of us, but we are not acting on it.
No, you're right. And in fact, let me share a little secret that I happen to overhear. Now, Akhil obviously sits on the board of something, and that he asked that person that, you haven't had board meetings recently. And that person said, well, you are the only one who comes in regularly and contributes. The others don't, and which is why we are not having. So I'm not going to take names, but this is exactly what happened right half an hour back. So clearly, this is another issue that while we would want to bring the industry people into the academic world, many a times they do not have the time or they do not have sufficient interest. And the other thing is, since we are talking about skilling, we've been talking about skilling the entire day, everyone talks about lifelong learning. Everyone talks about the need to train people, the need to skill people, but when it actually comes down to sending your people for a slightly prolonged period, everyone hesitates. I actually had an industry leader tell me, when I train my people, they immediately go back and then they quit and they join some other company because they get a better opportunity there. And I said, please look at it from an industry perspective, because you will need a replacement. Let that person go. But if the entire industry decides to skill people, you will always have some other skilled person to replace.
One idea. To come. All the students studying management, they go out, and also technical engineering, they go out to industry while they're studying to do a 8 weeks or 12 weeks internship. Have you thought that your professors could benefit by doing a 12 weeks internship with industry?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a sabbatical program where we encourage our faculty to go out and work in the industry. And not just for 12 weeks. We say go for a year, even go up to 2 years.
How many of them take?
That's a problem. Probably 2 or 3 have taken it.
Is it because the industry doesn't call them? Or
No. It's not because the industry doesn't call them. It's simply because they are happy. They're comfortable in the status quo. And, we have our own set of problems. And since I've straddled both the corporate world, it is changing, but it is changing not at the pace at which we would want to. I'll give you the example of the corporate world. So when I was working with Tata Steel, and I worked for 8.5 years after my engineering, my very first meeting with my boss, there was somebody who came and said, "Ki, "Arey sir, wo training ka ek aaya hai, to kisko bhejna hai?" So that boss, that divisional manager, thought for some time, and he said, "वो शर्मा को भेज दो, शर्मा काम तो करता नहीं है, तो उसको भेज दो training के लिए." So the entire concept of training was send that person who's dispensable, जो कोई काम नहीं करता है. Now at least that has changed, and now you actually send the really talented people to come and train.
If you see the industry,
but not everywhere, Akhil. Not everywhere.
But if you see industry behavior, lot of short-term courses are coming up, and industry is encouraging employees to go for short-term. I myself attended this Sunday a 6-hour program on ChatGPT and AI connection. Mind-boggling as to how many new things are happening around us. I do not know, sir, maybe it's ignorance, that do professors keep themselves updated?
Yes, we keep ourselves updated. But again, let me admit that we possibly also engage in the wrong conversations. So for example, the last 3 academic conversations that I've had, I'm not talking just about my institution, but I happen to sit on the boards of some other universities, both in the country and outside. The entire conversation was around, should we allow students to use ChatGPT or should we not? And I said, it's almost like 30 years back, somebody having a conversation, should we allow students to use calculators or should we not? Log table use karwaoge kya aaj? Now, ChatGPT is here. And therefore, instead of talking about whether or not to allow ChatGPT, you have to acknowledge that ChatGPT is here, and then now figure out how do you make the best use of ChatGPT in the academic world. So I agree that we are possibly having wrong conversations, but some of us are having the right conversations.
Yeah, but we seem to agree too much on too many things.
Yes.
I thought that, if you permit, sir, can I?
Absolutely,
Ask,
absolutely.
Anybody wants to ask a question? Yes, sir.
Too many
Very
hands.
brief. Give it very brief. Very brief.
Yes, sir. I'll keep it very brief. I'll just give a brief introduction. I have both sides. I have a manufacturing unit, and I also have a learning and development company. So one part that is my observation is that everyone is blaming mostly the input. That is, if you go to the colleges, they would say the schools is where things are not happening and we are not getting the same quality of students that we were getting earlier. When we go to the industry, they have the thing that, okay, the colleges of higher learning, they are not giving us the input. My sort of question is, say for example, if there is a lower KG teacher who's teaching lower KG or KG, they go through a Montessori course. Whereas for the higher learning, what is the support system? What is we take people in based on their knowledge. But do we have anything where we teach them what is learning? What is the psychology behind learning? Is there any system? That is, because we work a lot on curriculum, how much are we working on the teachers themselves who can really make a big difference to the entire part?
What's your name, sir?
I'm Rohit, sir.
Rohit. I would be very cautious in addressing that question. We do not want to question the quality of professors or intake. But I would take a little diversion that are they updated? And that's the same thing we were discussing before Rohit asked the question. How much effort is going in to make them state of art? Because if they are not state of art, the students will also learn. It was coincident that my first PhD thesis was on industry-academia interface. And in 2 institutes, which I'll not name in Middle South India, IT institute, they were teaching Fortran and COBOL. So Rohit, your question is absolutely to that point, that they were teaching Fortran and COBOL. So I asked the director as part of my research that, sir, have you heard of Sable? Have you heard of SAP? Have you heard of Oracle? And he said, no, but these are the foundation. I still have to understand if that was a foundation. What's your reaction to Rohit's comment?
So I completely agree with what you have said, Rohit.
Can I just give a small...
Allow me to
Please, sorry.
kind of respond. So I completely agree with you. And that is on both the issues. So I think you've raised 2 issues. One is the supply side issue, that everyone keeps blaming the supply. And I completely agree with you, blaming the supply has got absolutely no meaning. Because if you send us the brightest students, what are we really value adding any which way? I can say that of IITs and IIMs, we get the best of the lot. And if we are not making them slightly better, then somewhere we are messed up. However, when it comes to the second tier or the third tier schools, I completely agree that they need to spend some resources on their faculty. We conduct faculty development programs, and when we invite them for the faculty development for, say, a program of 6 weeks, the colleges are reluctant to send their faculty. They say, "आप 3 दिन का कुछ करवा दीजिए." 3 दिन में क्या होगा? 3 दिन में we'll just do a song and dance sequence and listen to us.
Cosmetic,
like you people are listening to us and you'll go back saying, "बहुत बढ़िया बोला." But nothing goes in. I mean, 3 days are not good enough for us to actually give either competence or change the attitudes. And the second part is also about the attitude. We need to have the attitude as faculty members, I'm donning the hat of faculty over here, that we don't know everything. In fact, we hardly know anything. And therefore, we need to understand that if we want to teach students something, every student has a different way of learning. And therefore, instead of focusing on ourselves, we should try and create what we call the participant-centered learning. Instead of putting the teacher on the pedestal, we should put the participant at the center and then figure out who needs what and therefore how can we deliver
All
it.
this should boil down to one thing, that when they come out of academic institution, they should be employable. And as quickly deployable, employable and put on the job, because the gap that we see from what we want from in the academia and what we get is sometimes so large. So people like Infosys, they have set up a very impressive training center at Mysore. Many companies.
Tata's have TMTC,
and
Mahindra has
SCL,
MMTC,
they
so on and
spend
so
a
forth.
lot of energy and resources behind retraining, and that could be saved if the first step of academic, and Rohit, taking your point, sir, I'll come back because shortage of time, so.
I'll not take more time, sir.
No, hang on.
Connect with you after the program.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll miss out on other questions.
Rohit, there were 4 more hands and we have exactly 4 minutes and 39 seconds on that clock. So
Yes,
very
ma'am.
quickly, if
Janvi.
you could pass the mic.
You have to ask an easy question, Janvi. Okay.
So yes, actually my question is to him. So one of the issues that we as an industry are facing today, I want to understand whether one, are you aware about it? Second, if yes, what are you doing about it? So the attitude, while functional skills may still be getting upgraded and being taught to them, there's a shift in the attitude when you see Gen Z coming into workforce. To cite an example, if we have to, for example, move to another organization, I'll be very loyal to of how I exit this organization, keeping in mind that there's a proper handover and that the work continues. However, Gen Z, can you relieve me in 15 days? I need time. So there's a shift in the attitude. Because of course, from the place where we operate in, from when we came into workforce, there was not so much of abundance of opportunities and choices as much as they have today. So how are you dealing with this kind of issues? Because that's something industry is facing very well. So are they getting trained on those aspects also?
So the answer is yes on both, which is yes, we are aware, and yes, we are doing something about it. So one of the things that I've started talking about in multiple fora is that please don't talk about hard skills and soft skills. This entire soft skills is a bizarre word to use because that's the hardest to teach. And therefore, what I tell them is talk about technical skills and people skills. So when it comes to these attitudes, what we are now doing is we are moving more towards experiential training methods and experiential learning even in the classroom. For instance, at IIM Indore, we used to have a program called Rural Immersion Program. I changed it because in Rural Immersion Program, what our students used to do was, because we wanted them to be empathetic, we wanted them to have an high emotional quotient, they would call up the villagers, and then they would ask about their problems, and then they would try to suggest solutions. And I said, this is bizarre. For the one reason, I did not like the acronym, RIP. Did not make sense to me. And the second, I said, it's one thing to actually hear about a problem, and it's another thing to experience it. So we changed it to Rural Engagement Program. Now my students mandatorily have to go and live in the villages for a week. And then they experience that problem. So it's one thing to actually hear from someone that I have to walk 2 kilometers to fetch water, and it's another thing to actually walk those 2 kilometers for 7 days and then fetch water.
That's very well
and
tried.
now those attitudes are coming in. And by the way, we have actually identified a set of 5 attitudes which we believe are going to be the necessary attitudes in the world to come. And 300 deans met from all over the world and agreed. I mean, look at the impossibility of it. 300 academicians agreeing on something. That's unheard of. But we did agree, and we came up with those 5 skills, which are essentially the attitudinal aspects.
That is a well-tried method because in Unilever, I spent half my career with Unilever. They would go to village in Etah. Etah is district Mainpuri, very far off from here, and they would stay for 2 months in the Mukhia's house and do hands-on work at the village. So that, what you're mentioning, is very practical and well-tried by industry also. I think the issue here, Himanshu, at the end of our 2 minutes is that we still don't have a formula going forward which can be worked upon. I think we are all talking like in a conference like this, oh, this should be done, this should be done, this should be done. But frankly, I feel that there's no forum on which this can be addressed. And this is a serious issue with the industry. Look at today's this thing. I was supposed to be a not a panelist, but a co-conversationist. And we all I land up as a moderator, literally. But the fact is, it is painful for industry. Because at the end of the day, the success of the people that we hire depends on what they are trained in. So it's not one institute or two institutes we are pointing at. It's the overall revamp that is required in the academia world about connecting with industry. I think the NEP, unfortunately, has not addressed that. We thought the NEP would address the new educational policy, would address development of faculty. It has somehow given it a little skip. But that does not stop us from industry and academia to work together. I feel maybe ETHR could take an initiative and arrange for more solid interaction between academia and industry people. More solid in the sense that more number, more representative, more diverse, and at the end of the day, with a purpose to end how we can end this dilemma.
All right. So with that bell ringing, I think I can summarize is that with the Socratic axiom, which is something that I've followed by and lived by, that education and learning is the progressive realization of your own ignorance. The more we learn, the more we realize how ignorant we are. So if nothing else, today we go back thinking how ignorant we are and what all we need to do.
So
but thank you so much.
Just to have a last word.
And thank you very much.
Would you carry this message when you go to your academic fraternity?
I will. I will discuss this in my next academic council.
And see what happens. If something can be done, we'll be more than happy to partner with you. Thank you, Himanshu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.